The boardroom lights flickered like they knew what was coming. You stood in the corner, still in your tailored charcoal suit, while the others sat, 12 members of the family-led executive team, eyes darting between papers, glass, and her. Your sister, Karina, wore her title like a blade, cold and ready to cut. And when she smiled, the room flinched. She didn't let your name hang long in the air. It came clipped and sharp, buried in legalese. Effective immediately. Conflict. A vision. Misalignment with company trajectory. You didn't speak. You didn't blink. And when she toasted her own rise later that night in the executive suite bar, she didn't know the security feed was still rolling. You knew the cameras didn't sleep. You'd installed them yourself 5 years ago during the chain's expansion into Tokyo. Discreet, encrypted, their footage routed not only to central storage, but also mirrored, quietly, invisibly, to a cloud structure under your name. Karina's whisper to the VP of Finance, he never saw it coming, curled into that lens like a confession to the dark. They thought you were shattered. They thought silence meant surrender. But you walked out that night with your badge still warm against your chest, your termination papers unsigned, and an exhalation deep enough to echo in the hall of mirrors that lined the hotel's north tower. Karina believed she'd won. Within 48 hours, your parking access was revoked, your office stripped clean, your name purged from internal directories. She announced sweeping changes to the media, branding the future of the family's billion-dollar chain as a refined, unified vision, led by innovative new leadership. Your removal was painted as an amicable pivot, a professional divergence. But the truth sat in the shadows behind her voice. You knew that empire was built on secrets. What she forgot was that you helped bury most of them. The offshore transfer of Dubai funds masked as environmental consulting, the mirrored properties used to inflate market value ahead of mergers, the guest data quietly sold to third parties. You were the architect of her weapons. You were also their counterweight. The signal came through the night she hosted the celebration gala at the Cascada Resort, the flagship hotel your parents built stone by stone. She descended the grand staircase in white silk, the chandelier's light setting her like a crown. The executives applauded. The press captured every angle. No one noticed the crimson flash in the upper right security cam, your ghost signature, marking that the feed had been intercepted. They thought exile would destroy you, but exile taught you how to haunt. You sat 3 floors below, in a shuttered spa suite with servers humming beside you, and your own screen feeding you every conversation. Held that night, unguarded, euphoric, stupid, the CFO's backhanded joke about Karina's rise. Let her reign while it lasts. If the audit ghosts come knocking, I wasn't here. He laughed too loudly. The VP of marketing didn't laugh at all. You knew power isn't what they think it is. It's not the podium. It's the switchboard. Karina grabbed the stage, but you still owned the wires behind it. Her firing you wasn't just betrayal. It was amateur. And when she stood under the spotlights, toasting her victory, she toasted to a version of the kingdom that had already started burning. Your allies weren't gone. They were watching. The head of Asia-Pacific operations sent a single text that night. I saw what she did. You're not alone. You didn't reply. Not because you doubted him, but because every message was already being captured. Karina had spun surveillance into a web she thought only she controlled. But you had built the first threads long before. She could spell espionage. They thought the game ended when you were erased, but erasure is just a new page, and your pen was still full. At 3:14 a.m., While the gala descended into drunken laughter and quiet betrayals, you keyed in the last firewall override to the company's personnel node. A new user ID registered in the system. Elias Vorn, VP of Expansion, transferred in under a forged subsidiary housed beneath a dummy consultancy in Luxembourg. You were now in the system again, not as yourself, but as the signal waiting to wake. She had no idea you were back inside the walls. Your sister slept that night in the presidential suite, the one your mother designed with crushed velvet curtains and oak panels brought in from the family estate. She never noticed the framed photo on the desk was replaced. You had switched it the moment the housekeeping tag was flipped on the door. The new photo showed your father, alone. She didn't notice, but you knew she would. Eventually. And when she did, the first crack in her certainty would appear. The elevator opened like it remembered you. No chime, no announcement. Just the soft groan of gears moving secrets between floors. You stepped out onto level 49, 3 stories beneath the executive floor, dressed in a gray suit that didn't belong to you, carrying credentials that did. Elias Vorn's ID scanned clean. HR had onboarded him 3 weeks ago with a glowing backstory of mergers, takeovers, and quiet success in the Eastern Bloc. You watched Karina's assistant hand out internal memos about Elias's radical insights into market penetration. They never asked who hired him. That was the first crack. You knew the cracks would widen if pushed just right. So you started slow. Quiet meetings with disillusioned regional managers. Strategic late-night emails from Elias's console. Access. Logs rewritten in real time. You had become a whisper between the walls of your own house. Karina didn't know Elias was already rerouting core system diagnostics to an off-grid data vault. Every guest entry, payroll node, and supplier invoice began to pass through your net. Not stolen, just borrowed, watched, rewritten where needed. And the things she buried under classified contracts began to shine in sharp relief under your eyes. They thought you were rebuilding your life somewhere else. That maybe you'd gone spiritual, broken by the betrayal. But they didn't realize your silence was a scythe. You never left the building. You just changed floors. You planted the first detonator inside the Santiago procurement system, right under the discount vendor contract Karina brokered with her college friend. The kickbacks were obvious to anyone looking, but no one was. You sent the report directly to the Compliance Division's auto audit queue, tagged with a random employee ID. Then you waited. The signal came through 48 hours later. Inconsistencies detected. Escalation initiated. You smiled without moving. The building groaned slightly in the evening wind. Karina didn't understand that control isn't about titles. It's about anticipation. She led with ambition. You led with pattern recognition. Every step she took, you already mapped. The fake strategic summit she pitched in Prague, already tapped and flagged. The late-night transfer from corporate accounts into the blind Cayman Trust. You watched it ping through the system and left it untouched, for now. They thought the company was surging, profits rising, press coverage glowing. They didn't see the slow siphon happening under their feet. You knew what to leak, what to conceal, what to time. Not just for chaos, but for precision. You met with the old CTO under an alias, posed as a Swiss compliance officer doing anonymous reviews for the holding company. Over 2 cups of espresso and silence, you handed him a dossier of altered invoices, vendor manipulations, and a sequence of IP logs that led back to Karina's office. He didn't say anything until the end. Then just, she always wanted it too fast. You nodded and walked away. They thought you were working alone. But ghosts move in groups. The head of internal security sent you encrypted fragments each week, screenshots, camera clips, fragments of voice calls, no explanation. Just file names like Rev001 and Swanfall. He didn't ask why. Maybe he didn't need to. Karina began to twitch when she passed Elias in the halls. Some part of her sensed the wrongness, the shape of a man too smooth, too quiet, too cold. You saw it in her eyes when she tried to remember if she'd approved his hire. She hadn't. But she couldn't admit it. Not without revealing she no longer held all the keys. Your office under Elias's name had nothing personal. Just screens, encrypted cables, and a mirror placed on the wall behind your desk, angled just slightly to reflect the hallway outside. Every time she passed, you watched. Her look at her own reflection. It never lingered. But it flickered. You knew she was unraveling slowly. She just didn't feel the threads pull yet. The second detonator was the supply chain AI she bragged about at conferences. The one that supposedly predicted trends and reduced waste by 32%. You slipped in a line of code that randomized outputs, once every 72 hours. Not enough to alert engineers, just enough to cause missed shipments, overbooked suites, and unexplained food waste spikes. It wasn't sabotage, it was confusion. By the third week, department heads started emailing Elias about inconsistencies, slowdowns, dead data. You always replied warmly, helpfully. Looking into it. Appreciate your patience. But behind the glass, you were pushing every misfire just a little further into the red. Karina called a war room meeting. 12 directors, an angry slideshow, and data that didn't make sense anymore. You watched from the camera tucked into the chandelier's base. She blamed the logistics team, the analytics engineers, even suggested sabotage from a rival chain. Never once did she consider the rot came from within. You sent one message after the meeting. No name, no source. Just, you forgot who taught you the system. The silence after was thick enough to drown in.